Well, what is the Labour government going to do for you? What's it going to do for the country? And are we going to be better off with Rachel Reeves as Chancellor? She set out her stall in the first speech to the public. Seemed a bit light on detail as far as I was concerned. But anyway, we've got an expert guest coming up in a moment. But before we do that, let's just look at a very quick clip of what Rachel had to say.
In the run-up to the general election, I set out the crucial first steps in our economic plans to deliver economic stability so we can grow our economy and keep taxes, inflation and mortgages as low as possible. And that commitment stands. I emphasised this commitment in a meeting with the Governor of the Bank of England on Friday, and I will do the same when I meet the Chair of the Office for Budget Responsibility this week. These institutions are guarantors of our economic stability, and I will not be playing games at their expense. Over the weekend, I made clear to Treasury officials that the manifesto commitments that we were elected on will be kept to and they will be delivered on. That includes robust fiscal rules. And it includes our commitments to no increases in national insurance and the basic higher or additional rates of income tax or VAT.
OK, I'm joined now by Phillip Ullmann. He's a businessman who, at his peak, employed 100,000 people. He's also a writer for the Daily Telegraph and has now created the Manna Journey, which is a digital platform which supplies truth on a series of issues, wisdom, the state and, indeed, innovative business practices. Phillip, what's she talking about?
Well, I don't understand a word she's saying. I don't think anybody understands what she's saying. She's using language that no one understands, talking about growth in GDP. What's GDP? Nobody understands it. What is growth? So she says something about if the growth of the UK economy would mimic the average of the OECD,
then she'd have 58 billion.
What does that mean? And the trouble is, she's not talking to people. She's not using language that people understand. And you were discussing before about the lack of trust. As long as politicians are talking a different language, you're never going to trust them because they're not in the same world.
Yeah, but hang on a second. An increase in GDP, an increase in the size of the economy, must be a good thing.
What is GDP? How does it measure? Well, it doesn't. No, it's not a real issue for the people. The real issues are, one, I can't afford to put food on the table because food is now costing 25% more than it did 2 years ago. Two, my mortgage is about to double because interest rates, I've moved off a fixed rate to a variable rate. I'm paying double. How am I going to pay? How am I going to pay the double in a new fixed double the interest rate? How am I going to afford the rent if I'm in rented accommodation? There's so many real questions, unemployment, that none of them, this is supposed to be the Labour Party, but none of those issues are even discussed or raised, which is absurd.
Well, let's just go back to this point. Inflation is going down, we're told. Why is that a problem?
But is it? If you ask people, are they paying less than they paid 2 years ago, everyone will tell you, no, it's 25% up. So stop this nonsense about inflation going down, because it's not. And it's not the truth. And
it's failed to rise as quickly.
Well, what does it mean? How is it calculated? No one understands. All people know is that when they go to the supermarket, it costs a lot more than it did 2 years ago, and no one's telling the truth.
OK, so central to Rachel Reeves' strategy, apart from the independence of the Bank of England and the independence of the OBR, which I accept is a load of gobbledygook that nobody cares about. OK, I get that. But she says that she wants to make it easier for people to build houses. Surely, when you talk about mortgages doubling, surely building houses is going to cut the cost of housing, and that's going to be a good thing.
Well, is she actually going to be able to ensure that more houses are built? Because she's not going to build the houses. Who's going to build the houses? It's the people that own the land, the house builders, and they will only build those houses if they can make a profit, because they're private companies that have to make a profit. And telling them to build 40% social housing is simply going to mean that every house that I buy for 100%, I've got to cover the cost of 40% of social housing. They're not going to pay the cost.
Sorry, Phil, let me get this right in my mind. So I build 100 houses.
Yeah.
I'm allowed to sell 60 of them, but I've got to give 40 of them to people for free. Well, how on earth? Well, that's never going to happen, is it?
Of course it's not, because who's going to cover the costs? These are profit companies that are profiteering, and therefore they can say, okay, 40% has to go into the price. So 60% will have to cover the 100%. Therefore, that 40%, which is on top, is going to have to be increasing the price. Therefore, the prices will go, and it just doesn't work. It's absurd.
But here's the fundamental immorality. To make the mathematics simple, let's call it 50-50 rather than 60-40. What it means is, if I want to buy a house on one of these new housing estates, I've got to buy a house for an unemployed person down the road, so I've got to buy two, one I get to keep and one they get to keep, having paid nothing for it.
But at the moment, I can't afford to pay the mortgage on my existing house because that's going to double because of the interest rate hike. So I can't even pay my existing mortgage. How am I going to pay for another house? The whole thing is just, why are we going to wait 2 years? They're going to realise it's a complete non-starter, and then people are going to get very angry. So
what about this whole idea that, OK, I get the whole 40% thing. I get that. I get it's easy, because if I want my own house, I've got to buy an unemployed person one and give it them for free. I understand all that. But surely, if we build 1.5 million houses, the price will go down anyway, won't it?
Will it?
I don't know.
Of course it won't.
Why not?
Because we're told it's about demand and supply, but if the banks are not lending more and more money, the prices wouldn't have increased in the first place. It's not demand and supply, it's because the banks are continuing to lend more. As we discussed in previous weeks, the money is actually created by the banks. So the reason why house prices have increased is because banks are now lending much more for each house, and therefore the house prices are growing because of the amount of money that the banks are creating to buy these houses. It's nothing to do with another 1.5. That's not going to reduce the price of houses.
Because look, I'm going to do this really simply, because the way that I understand it is this. You build 1.5 million... Well, hang on a second. Forget all that. 1.5 million new mobile phones come on the market. One would expect mobile phones to reduce in price as a result, because there's more of them and there's more competition. But what you're saying is, because of this crazed fractional reserve banking, where money is created at a touch of a button, all that happens is the value of a house is not what it's worth. It's just, well, you can get 5 times your salary, so you might as well get that. So we're going to price it at £400,000 just because that's what you can pay, not because that's what it's worth.
Absolutely, it's increased because more money is lent. And fundamentally, building 1.5 million is going to make no difference, because effectively the private landowners who are in control of it are not going to play ball with whatever she wants. She may be at the centre. She may start to say, OK, we'll control it. You can't control it from the centre, because they're not building the houses. It's these private organisations and they won't build them. And they're actually predicting, by the way, that the number of houses is going to reduce, not to increase. And she can't force them to build, because the whole concept's not going to work.
I'll tell you what I did think was curious, Philip. I watched Rachel Reeves' speech, as you did, and obviously you watch it with a more knowledgeable eye. You know, I'm a debater, you're a businessman, but I don't see how you can solve all the problems of the British economy by allowing wind turbines onshore and building more houses. Surely our problems are more significant than that.
I think absolutely right. So we have to almost ask, why have we got a manifesto and now a speech from the new Chancellor which doesn't deal with the real world, which doesn't deal with the real problems that we're facing? And you have to look at the process by which that manifesto was created. And how was it created? You get a bunch of politicians who haven't ever been in the real world, who are full-time politicians.
They've been SPADs before, though.
Maybe. But you put them in a room with SPADs, special advisors, who are straight out of university or Oxbridge, albeit, but again haven't had any experience of the world, and expect them together to sort the problems of the world. Well, they're not going to, and that's why you get these manifestos.
Philip, hold that there. We're going to go to a break, but we're going to continue to talk to Philip straight after this.
Is talk.
This is The Late Show with Andre Walker. Asher Gould has done his back in, Bubba. I don't know. I don't get what that's all about. But he sent me a very spirited message saying that his back was injured, and I listened to about 50% of it. Anyway, still here with Phillip Ullmann. Phillip Ullmann is the entrepreneur that built a company with 100,000 members of staff, £1 billion turnover, attempted to turn it into a social enterprise, and bluntly failed. because of the environment that business is in at the moment, and now has created this platform called the Manna Journey. Just very quickly, you can get it on YouTube, the Manna Journey.
Absolutely. So what I realised in business that it wasn't working.
Yeah.
I employed lots of people. We were not looking after people. We were not looking after the planet.
And these are those low-paid warehouse jobs.
They're low-paid warehouse jobs. People are running around warehouses doing 18 miles a shift, paid minimum wage, being exploited, living, sharing beds, one person in bed a day. There was a horrible, horrible world. But I had the right intentions. I realised that we had to start focusing and looking after people and looking after... My primary focus was on people, and I couldn't do it. I tried to convert the company, and it was our company, but because the whole of the industry, which is all the companies that we competed with, and all our customers were focused on the shareholder, one person or one company could not change.
Yeah, we don't name the companies that you work for, because there's no point in besmirching one of them, because it's a whole industry, isn't it?
I tried to change it, and I realised until the state is aligned wholly with organisations and they're all focused on people and the planet, we're not going to be able to deal with the big problems that we're facing.
The Manna Journey is all about corporate responsibility and indeed wisdom, ancient wisdom. But let's have another look at Rachel Reeves, because we've only got a couple of minutes with Philip, so let's take that away.
Planning reform has become a byword for political timidity in the face of vested interests and a graveyard of economic ambition. Our antiquated planning system leaves too many important projects tied up for years and years in red tape before shovels even get in the ground. We promised to put planning reform at the centre of our political argument, and we did. We said we would grasp the nettle of planning reform, and we are doing so. Today, I can tell you that that work is underway. Over the weekend, I met with the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister to agree the urgent action needed to fix our planning system. Today, alongside the Deputy Prime Minister, I am taking immediate action to deliver this Labour government's mission to kickstart economic growth and to take the urgent steps necessary to build the infrastructure that we need, including 1.5 million homes in the next 5 years.
Philip?
Yeah, fundamentally, there's a lack of understanding of how to actually resolve the problem. So she's saying we need to bring things into the centre. We need to take control of the planning process. We need to take it away from the local authority and start to make the decisions at the centre. In other words, she's saying more regulation, more central control. That isn't the problem. The more regulation you have, the less things are going to work. The way I like to put it is we're supposed to educate, not to regulate. And as soon as a politician is talking about more and more regulation, they just fundamentally got it wrong.
So her proposals are that there's going to be more central decision-making, there's going to be more central targets, and they're going to reduce regulation. But she hasn't actually said what that reduction in regulation is, but what she has said is that there's going to be hundreds of more local government planning officers. What it sounds like to me, and Philip, you alluded to this, there's going to be much more regulation, much more centralisation, and really no payback in terms of supporting the community.
Absolutely. As I say, we need to look at educating people so that people understand the problem. Why is it that there are enough houses? And it's to do with the monetary system. It's to do with money, as we talked about before. It's to do with the fact that companies are interested in themselves. So even though she wants to build, she's going to set these targets at the centre of how many houses one needs to build. But they're not going to build them because she can't control them, because they're private companies that want to make profits.
Nobody's going to build anything if I have to pay for 2 houses and only get one.
I can tell you now that the housing builders are not increasing their forecast for the number of houses they're going to, because they're not going to build them. So it doesn't matter. She thinks she can control from the centre. She can't.
But what about this proposition? And you're now going to come on every week to give some understanding of all of this. But what about this central proposition that what Labour have got, if you accept that there is a real problem, if you accept that 44% of GDP being spent on the government is about as much as we can do, if you accept that the NHS is going badly, if you accept that we're moving to a low-wage economy, why focus on housing and wind farms? It just feels pathetic.
Look, I'd start with the basics. Why talk language that no one understands? Why talk about
GDP, OBRs?
GDP, all these things, OBRs? No one cares about the OBR. No one cares about... No one knows... real people don't know and understand any of these issues. And in fact, she doesn't understand any of these issues. I'm not trying to criticise her personally, but the whole system, none of the politicians are communicating honestly with people.
So what you've said to me before, just to remind people who haven't heard from you before, you've said, well, we measure inflation as a basket of goods. You can literally measure every pound that's being spent in this country and get real data, but we don't like doing that because it gives analysts a job to make figures up.
No, it's worse than that. It means they can talk... politicians are not trusted. No one's trusted them because they're not talking languages that anyone understands. If you ask them, why did the Labour Party win an election? Well, they actually got less votes. If you look at it, 40% is what Corbyn got in the last, and they got 35%. So this is not a support for a set of ideas because no one understands the ideas. They're not giving you any ideas. All it was the system was letting people down. No one was dealing with cost of living increases. No one was dealing with the fact that people's mortgage rates are going to double, and therefore they're angry with the incumbents. It wasn't anything to do with trust or a belief that Labour is going to sort it, and they're not, because their manifesto and their budget is not dealing with it.
Quickly, before we go, when you watch a Chancellor of the Exchequer with so few ideas this early on, does it worry you?
Yes, of course it worries me, because the danger is that we have 2 or 3 years for Rachel Reeves and Starmer to learn that what they're doing is not going to work, and therefore, and the people are hurting. People cannot afford to put food on the table now, and they're going to get angry. And they're angry now. And I don't believe this. They haven't got a lot of time, because if they don't start addressing these issues, people are going to start getting angry with them again very quickly. And therefore, what they need to do, I'd love to speak to... I'm not particularly affiliated with either the Conservative Party or the Labour Party. I want to talk to either party or both parties about how we can actually start to address these issues, listen to people, start to use language that everyone understands.
But politics just feels so short-term.
But it's short term, but it's more than that. It's not connected to the people. They're not talking language that people understand, and they're not sharing. They're not dealing with the real problems. They're just in an ivory tower, and the politicians sit down with the spads and work outside, which is no use to anybody. What we need to do is if Rachel Reeves or anybody gave me a call, I'd be delighted to go and talk to them. And the 5 years, they've got a massive opportunity to sort out the problems, but only if they start talking to people, listening to people, open, and actually dealing with the real problems, rather than trying to stuff which is not going to work and waste another 3 years, and then they're going to be in a bad place. Let's start to try and address the real problems and start to communicate.
I have to say, Philip, I find it thoroughly depressing that somebody turns around and says that the solution to the cost of housing in this country is that you will be allowed to buy a house as long as you buy one for somebody else and give it to them for free. So you have to buy 2 houses instead of 1. Philip, I have to say thank you so much for coming in. We are getting Philip back every single week now to discuss some of the biggest political issues and indeed some of the economic issues as well. So we'll let him watch some of the other depressing tripe that comes out of both the government and the opposition. He does it so you don't have to. Anyway, you can give us a call 0344 499 1000. You can WhatsApp us on the same number. Text the word talk plus your message to 87222, or you can tweet me at Andre JP Walker or at TalkTV if you really insist. Ash is away, so Andre's at play. I'll be back in a moment.